You don't have to defend yourself to be understood. You don't have to explain your worth to be valued. Because every time you rush to prove your intentions, you hand your peace to someone who doesn't deserve it. The loudest person in the room isn't the strongest. The calm one is. Silence isn't weakness, it's control. And when you stop defending yourself, you stop reacting and start leading. Because true confidence doesn't beg to be seen, it simply stands and speaks through calm. Silence speaks confidence. It's one of those things that most people misunderstand because they think silence means weakness or that staying quiet makes you seem guilty or unsure. But that's not true. Real confidence doesn't shout, it doesn't argue, it doesn't chase approval. Real confidence is calm, collected, and grounded. When you stop defending yourself in every conversation, every disagreement, every accusation, you begin to realize how much of your peace was being spent trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. You don't owe everyone an explanation. You don't need to justify every decision, every opinion, or every boundary you set. The need to defend comes from fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of rejection, fear of losing control. But when you reach a point where you are rooted enough in who you are, you no longer need the world to understand you. You simply let your actions and your consistency do the talking. Imagine someone accusing you of something you didn't do. Your natural instinct might be to jump in, explain, over-explain, defend, clarify every little thing until the other person finally says, "Okay, I get it." But here's the truth: people who want to misunderstand, you will always find a reason to. They don't want your explanation, they want your reaction. They want to see if they can pull you out of your calm, if they can make you lose your composure. And when you do, they win twice. First, by making you doubt yourself, and second, by proving to themselves that you're as emotionally unstable as they claimed. Silence, in those moments, is not surrender. It's strength. It's saying, "I don't need to fight to be right." You are not here to perform your worth for others. You're here to protect your peace and move with purpose. The most powerful people you'll ever meet don't explain much. They listen more than they speak. They observe before they respond. When they do speak, it's measured, thoughtful, and deliberate. That's because they know something most people don't. Calmness creates clarity, and clarity creates control. When you stay calm, you think better. You see the bigger picture. You don't waste energy trying to fix how people see you. Instead, you focus on being the kind of person you can respect when you look in the mirror. You realize that your value doesn't decrease just because someone else refuses to see it. You understand that your worth isn't negotiable and it doesn't depend on external approval. That kind of mindset is rare because it requires maturity. It requires you to be okay with being misunderstood, with being judged, with being the villain in someone else's story. And that's okay because you're not responsible for how others choose to interpret your truth. Silence also reveals emotional intelligence. When you don't rush to defend yourself, you give space for the truth to surface naturally. You allow the other person to show their character while you maintain yours. You don't match their energy, you maintain your own. That's the power of composure. It makes people wonder how you can stay so calm under pressure, how you can smile in the face of criticism, how you can choose stillness when chaos surrounds you. The answer is simple. Because you're grounded in truth. You know what really happened. You know your intent. And when you know the truth, you don't have to argue it. The truth can stand on its own. Lies need defending, truth doesn't. When you stop defending yourself, your silence becomes a boundary. It tells people, you don't get to pull me into emotional chaos. It communicates, without words, that your peace is not up for negotiation. It shows that you trust yourself enough to let people believe what they want. You stop chasing their understanding and start prioritizing your own sanity. You start to recognize that not every battle deserves your energy. Some people want to drag you into arguments, not to resolve anything, but to drain you. The moment you realize that, you step back. You protect your energy. You respond with silence, not out of arrogance, but out of wisdom. Because the more you defend, the more you feed the drama. And the more you feed it, the more power you give away. There's a kind of calm that only comes when you realize that being misunderstood won't destroy you. It might sting at first, because we all want to be seen and understood. But over time, you learn that peace is more valuable than perception. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, you make room for real understanding from people who actually care to listen. The right people don't need paragraphs to believe in you. They just need your consistency. They watch how you move, how you carry yourself, and that's enough. The wrong people, no matter how much you explain, will twist your words to fit their narrative. So, silence becomes your best response. It's not passive, it's intentional. It's choosing not to give power to what doesn't deserve it. Silence also teaches you patience. It allows time to reveal what words can't. Often, when we rush to defend ourselves, we speak from emotion, not clarity. We say things that don't help, that make things worse, that leave us feeling drained and unheard. But when you pause, breathe, and say nothing, you give the situation time to settle. You let emotions cool down, and you let reality speak for itself. That's the essence of true confidence. Trusting that truth doesn't need urgency to be real. You stop reacting and start responding. You begin to live from a place of control, not chaos. When you start practicing this, people will notice the shift. They'll test it. They'll say things to provoke you, to see if the old version of you will show up. But when you don't bite, when you don't defend, they start to realize that your silence is power. It's unsettling to those who rely on your reactions to feel validated. But it's liberating for you, because silence doesn't just protect your peace, it also exposes who's truly on your side. The ones who value you won't demand constant justification. They'll trust your heart, not just your words. The ones who don't will eventually distance themselves because they can't control what they can't provoke. There's a saying that goes, never argue with someone committed to misunderstanding you. That's exactly what silence embodies. It's a form of emotional discipline. It's choosing dignity over drama, peace over pride, and clarity over chaos. When you stay silent, you create space, and in that space, people show their true colors. You start to see patterns. You start to see who thrives on conflict and who's capable of growth. Silence gives you insight that defensiveness never can. It allows you to move strategically instead of impulsively. In a world where everyone is loud, reactive, and constantly trying to prove something, silence is rare. That's why it's powerful. It stands out. It commands respect. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Sometimes your calm presence is louder than any argument. It makes people lean in, listen, and wonder what gives you that strength. And the answer is, it's self-respect. When you stop defending yourself, you are quietly saying, I respect myself enough to not engage in every battle. You're saying, my energy is valuable, and I choose where to spend it. You're saying, I'm not here to convince anyone. I'm here to be authentic. That's the real message behind silence. Speaking confidence. It's the art of knowing that your peace is more important than your pride. Your calm is more powerful than your words, and your truth doesn't need to be shouted to be real. Boundaries aren't walls. They're filters for peace. Most people confuse boundaries with barriers. They think setting a boundary means you're cutting people off, shutting down, or acting cold. But that's not what boundaries are. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about keeping your peace in. They define where you end and someone else begins. They protect your energy, your time, and your emotional space. When you set a boundary, you're not being rude, you're being responsible. You're acknowledging that your peace, your focus, and your sanity matter just as much as anyone else's comfort. That's not selfishness, that's self-respect. Boundaries teach people how to treat you. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you teach people that your limits are negotiable. Every time you stay quiet to avoid conflict, you show them that your comfort doesn't matter. Over time, that creates resentment, exhaustion, and emotional burnout. You start to feel drained because you've given people access to parts of you that they never earned. Setting boundaries isn't about control, it's about clarity. It's communicating your needs without apology. It's saying, this is what I can give, and this is what I can't. It's understanding that your peace is priceless, and not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. When you start setting boundaries, you'll notice who respects you and who benefits from your lack of boundaries. Some people will push back. They'll call you distant, difficult, or even selfish. That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of how much they benefited from your lack of limits. People who truly care about you won't be threatened by your boundaries. They'll understand that it's not about rejection, it's about protection. They'll know that you're creating space for healthier communication, not cutting them out. The ones who get angry about your boundaries are the ones who were comfortable crossing them. That's how you know you're setting the right ones. Boundaries also bring emotional balance. Without them, you absorb everyone else's stress, problems, and expectations. You start to carry what isn't yours to carry. You take responsibility for how others feel, what they think, and how they respond. But when you draw a clear line, you remind yourself, their reaction is not my responsibility. You can be kind and firm at the same time. You can care for people and still say no. You can love deeply and still protect your space. That's emotional maturity. Understanding that you can't show up for others if you're constantly drained yourself. Think of boundaries like the rules of a healthy ecosystem. Everything has its place. Too much intrusion, and the system collapses. The same is true for your life. If you allow everyone access to your time, attention, and energy without limits, you'll eventually have nothing left to give. But when you set boundaries, you create structure. You decide who gets your time, what gets your energy, and where your focus goes. That's not cold, that's clarity. It's knowing that your life isn't an open door for everyone to walk through whenever they want. Boundaries also protect your emotional energy from manipulation. Some people use guilt to control you. They'll say things like, "You've changed," or "You don't care anymore," when you start to assert yourself. They want you to feel bad for protecting yourself. But remember, people who use guilt as a weapon are afraid of losing control. When you stay calm and hold your ground, you take that control back. You teach them that your kindness is not weakness. You show them that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And once you start living that way, your peace becomes untouchable. Boundaries also help you make better decisions. When you know your limits, you stop saying yes out of pressure or fear. You start saying yes because it aligns with your values. You stop overcommitting, over-explaining, and overextending. You start moving with intention. You learn that protecting your time is an act of self-care, and protecting your peace is an act of strength. You stop chasing validation from people who take without giving. You realize that saying no isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's making room for the things and people that truly matter. Setting boundaries doesn't require anger. You don't have to yell or argue to be firm. Calmness is your power. The most effective boundaries are communicated with quiet confidence. No, doesn't need a paragraph after it. I can't make it, doesn't need an apology. That doesn't work for me. Doesn't need guilt attached. You can stand firm and stay kind. That balance, kindness with firmness, is where true strength lies. Because when you operate from calm clarity, you're unshakable. You're not driven by emotion, you're guided by values. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not permanent walls. They can evolve as you grow. What served you last year might not serve you today. What felt comfortable before may now feel draining. That's okay. You're allowed to adjust your boundaries as your life changes. That's not inconsistency, that's growth. Healthy people will understand that. They'll grow with you. But the ones who only stayed because of what you gave them will fall away. Let them. You're not losing people. You're losing patterns that no longer serve your peace. Boundaries also teach self-trust. Every time you set a boundary and keep it, you reinforce to yourself that your needs matter. You rebuild self-respect. You stop betraying yourself to please others. You stop living for validation and start living from conviction. And the beautiful thing is, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. The guilt fades, the fear shrinks, and the peace expands. You start to feel lighter, calmer, and more in control of your life. You start to attract people who match that energy, people who respect your time, your space, and your silence. Boundaries are not the end of connection. They are the foundation of healthy connection. They create room for honesty, respect, and understanding. Without boundaries, relationships become tangled in obligation and resentment. But with them, love can breathe. Communication becomes clearer. Trust becomes stronger. Because when both sides know the limits, both sides feel safe. And safety, emotional safety, is the root of every meaningful connection. So when you set a boundary, don't feel guilty. Feel proud. You're teaching the world how to love you correctly. You're reminding yourself that your peace is sacred. You're choosing to live intentionally, not reactively. You're no longer letting other people's chaos become your responsibility. Boundaries are not about keeping people out. They're about keeping yourself whole. They're not punishment, they're protection. They're not coldness, they're clarity. And the moment you embrace that truth, your life begins to shift from constant exhaustion to calm empowerment, from people pleasing to peaceful living. Emotional control is the real power move. It's what separates those who react from those who lead. When you can control your emotions in a world that's constantly trying to provoke you, you become untouchable. Most people think power comes from being louder, tougher, or more dominant. But true power comes from stillness. It's the ability to stay calm when everything around you is chaos. It's the strength to pause instead of explode, to listen instead of argue, and to understand instead of assume. Emotional control doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you've learned to manage what you feel without letting it control your decisions, your tone, or your peace. When you're emotionally reactive, anyone can control you. All they have to do is find your trigger. They know exactly which words to say, which tone to use, which silence to hold, just long enough to make you snap. And the moment you react, they win. You hand them your power. You give them control over your mood, your response, your peace. But when you choose to stay calm, when you take a breath, when you pause, when you decide not to take the bait, everything changes. You take your power back. You show that your emotions serve you, not the other way around. Calm doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care intelligently. You've learned that reacting emotionally often leads to regret. The angry text, the defensive response, the impulsive decision, they all come from losing control in the moment. But when you slow down and let the first wave of emotion pass, clarity follows. That's where your strength lies, in that small space between what happens to you and how you respond. That space is everything. It's where your power, your wisdom, and your peace live. The people who can master that space are the ones who stay steady while everyone else falls apart. Emotional control is not suppression. It's awareness. It's being fully present with what you're feeling without letting it drive you off course. You can feel angry without being aggressive. You can feel hurt without becoming bitter. You can feel disappointed without losing hope. It's emotional discipline. The same way you train your body, you can train your mind and emotions. When you start doing that, your life becomes less about reacting to people and more about responding to purpose. You stop letting temporary feelings make permanent choices. You start leading your emotions instead of being led by them. The truth is, people will test your calm. They'll say things that sting. They'll push your buttons. They'll try to make you break character. But the key is to understand that their behavior is a reflection of them, not of you. When you stay calm in the face of disrespect, you're not letting them win. You're refusing to play their game. You're saying, "You don't get to decide my tone, my pace, or my peace." That's power. It's quiet, subtle, and deeply controlled. It's not about showing strength through aggression. It's about showing strength through restraint. When you master emotional control, you become unpredictable in the best way. People can't manipulate you because you don't respond the way they expect. You don't feed their ego with drama. You don't give them the reaction they crave. Instead, you stay centered, grounded, and intentional. That's what throws people off. Your calm becomes their confusion. They start to realize they can't control you anymore, and that's when they either rise to meet your energy or fall away. Either way, you win because you stayed true to your values instead of your emotions. Emotional control also creates mental clarity. When your emotions settle, your thinking sharpens. You stop saying things you don't mean, doing things you later regret, or making choices that don't align with your goals. You begin to respond based on logic, empathy, and self-awareness instead of impulse. That doesn't make you cold, it makes you effective. You learn to separate how you feel from what's true. You can acknowledge your emotions without letting them rewrite the situation. That kind of clarity saves relationships, careers, and reputations. It's what allows you to walk away with grace instead of guilt, to speak truth without hostility, and to protect your peace without apology. The strongest people are not the ones who never feel anger, sadness, or fear. They're the ones who can feel all of that and still choose their response. They know that emotions are data, not directives. They tell you what's happening inside, but they don't have to dictate what happens next. That's what makes emotional control such a superpower. It gives you freedom. Freedom from manipulation, freedom from overreaction, freedom from regret. You start living on your own terms instead of being pulled by everyone else's energy. Emotional control also builds respect. People trust those who stay calm under pressure. They see stability, reliability, and strength. They know you won't crumble in crisis or lash out in anger. That kind of presence changes how people treat you. They begin to match your tone. They become more mindful of their words. Your calm becomes contagious. Because energy is transferable, when you show calmness, others sense it and respond in kind. You lead with emotional intelligence, and that leadership creates safety and respect wherever you go. Practicing emotional control doesn't happen overnight. It's built through self-awareness, learning your triggers, your patterns, and your breaking points. It's catching yourself mid-reaction and choosing differently. It's recognizing that you don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. It's walking away from what doesn't deserve your peace. The more you practice, the stronger you become. You start noticing how much energy you save by not reacting to every provocation. You begin to feel lighter, more focused, and more at ease. Because when your emotions no longer control you, stress loses its grip. And that's when life starts to change. You stop feeling like a passenger in your own story and start feeling like the driver. You respond instead of react. You think before you speak. You breathe before you decide. You understand that not everything requires your energy. Not every insult deserves your attention. Not every emotion needs a reaction. You start to live from a place of stability and grace. And that stability becomes your quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Validation is internal, not earned through defense. The moment you start chasing validation, you hand your peace to someone else. You make your worth dependent on approval that was never yours to control. Most people spend their lives trying to convince others they're good enough, smart enough, kind enough, worthy enough. But the truth is, if you have to argue for your value, you've already given it away. Real confidence doesn't need applause. It doesn't need agreement. It doesn't need constant reassurance. It's built quietly from within through the small, consistent decisions to trust yourself even when no one else does. You can't force people to see your intentions. You can't make them appreciate your effort. You can't beg them to believe in your truth. The people who are determined to misunderstand, you will always twist your words. And the people who truly know your heart won't need an explanation. That's why validation has to come from the inside. It's not something you earn. It's something you realize. It's the understanding that your worth doesn't rise or fall based on how others treat you. You don't become less valuable because someone failed to recognize your value. You don't become wrong just because someone louder says you are. You are not who people say you are. You are who you know yourself to be. External validation is addictive. It gives a quick hit of reassurance, but it fades fast. Every time you rely on it, you teach your mind that peace depends on someone else's opinion. And that's a dangerous place to live because opinions change, people change, and approval is unstable. But when you shift that source of validation inward, everything stabilizes. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop needing to perform your worth. You start moving differently, calmer, surer, quieter. You make decisions that align with your values, not the crowd. You stop living to impress and start living to express. Internal validation is not arrogance. It's not pretending you don't care what anyone thinks. It's knowing that you can receive feedback without letting it rewrite your identity. You can appreciate praise without becoming dependent on it. You can handle criticism without collapsing. It's emotional balance, the kind that allows you to stay centered whether people love you or doubt you. You stop swinging between extremes because your self-worth stops fluctuating with external noise. You become your own anchor. That's what true confidence looks like. Grounded, not loud, certain, not defensive. Most of the time, the urge to defend yourself comes from insecurity. You want people to understand your intentions, to see your heart, to know you meant well. But here's the truth. The right people will know without you having to explain. And the wrong people won't believe you, no matter how hard you try. So why waste your energy trying to win people who aren't even playing fair? Why spend your peace on proving what's already true? The moment you stop defending and start standing, you reclaim your power. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you and start focusing on being consistent in your actions. Validation from within comes from integrity. When your actions align with your values, you don't need anyone's approval to feel at peace. You sleep well because you know you acted with honesty, even if no one noticed. You speak truthfully, even if no one clapped. You stay kind, even when it's not returned. That's what self-validation looks like. Doing the right thing because it's who you are, not because you want recognition. The world might not see your quiet consistency, but you will. And that's enough. When you stop chasing validation, you start living free. Free from overthinking what people think. free from explaining every choice, free from the need to be liked by everyone. You begin to move in your own rhythm. You speak with calm certainty instead of defensive urgency. You understand that not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Not every criticism requires a counterargument. Sometimes silence is your loudest confidence, because silence says, I know my truth. I don't need your approval to stand firm in it. Self-validation also brings emotional independence. You stop taking rejection as proof of failure. You start seeing it as redirection. You stop letting criticism define you and start letting it refine you. You stop needing constant reassurance because you've learned to give it to yourself. That's what growth feels like. Quiet assurance that you're enough, even when no one says it. And the more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. The noise outside loses its power because the voice inside grows stronger. There's another truth about external validation. It's never satisfied. The more you chase it, the more it demands. Today, you please one person. Tomorrow, it's someone else. You start bending, shrinking, adjusting just to fit everyone's expectations. And in the process, you lose yourself. You forget what you wanted, what you believed, what you stood for. That's the cost of living for validation. But when you validate yourself, you stop seeking permission to be you. You show up as your full self, unapologetically and consistently. That's where peace lives, not in being accepted by everyone, but in being true to yourself regardless of who accepts you. Internal validation doesn't mean you stop listening to others. It means you filter feedback through your own values instead of through fear. You can say, that's helpful, or that's not for me, without taking it personally. You can learn from others without losing yourself in their opinions. You develop the emotional maturity to stay open but unshaken. You understand that advice, opinions, and criticism are information, not definitions. You decide what sticks and what doesn't. That's how you maintain peace while still growing. And once you start living with internal validation, your energy changes. You walk differently. You speak differently. You stop explaining your boundaries because you no longer need approval to have them. You stop defending your decisions because you trust your judgment. You stop chasing relationships that require you to prove your worth because you already know it. You begin to attract people who match your confidence instead of feeding on your insecurity. You create a calm life, not because everyone agrees with you, but because you no longer need them to. When you know who you are, you stop performing for acceptance. You stop fighting to be seen. You understand that silence is not weakness and calm is not indifference. It's control, it's strength, it's clarity. And that kind of peace can't be given by others. It has to be built within, because validation that comes from others can be taken away, but validation that comes from within stays with you no matter where you go, no matter who leaves, no matter what's said. That's the power of calm confidence, knowing you don't need to defend your worth when you already know what it is.